soon. One word, one image of Greenland, styled in US flag colors, and suddenly, Denmark's Prime Minister is speaking unusually bluntly to Donald Trump. Stop the threats. Not a vague diplomatic note, not a carefully padded statement, a direct warning. So here's the question that changes everything. If the US already has long-standing defense access to Greenland through agreements with Denmark, why is the conversation shifting from cooperation to takeover language? And why is it escalating right now? Stay with me, because once you separate what's confirmed from what's political signaling, you'll see why Greenland has become one of the most sensitive pressure points in global politics, and why the people who live there are the most important voice in this entire story. Let's start with what is confirmed and on the record. Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, publicly rejected the idea that the United States should take over Greenland, calling it nonsensical, and saying plainly that the US has no right to annex any part of the Danish kingdom. She urged the US to stop making threats toward an ally and toward another country and people who have said they are not for sale. That language matters because it's not how close allies normally speak to each other. Now, what triggered the timing? A widely shared social media post added fuel to an already hot issue. A map of Greenland in American flag colors with the word "soon." It wasn't an official US government statement, but it was loud enough to provoke a diplomatic response. Denmark's ambassador responded with a pointed reminder: "We're allies, and Denmark expects respect for its territorial integrity." Mini rehook. If this is just a meme, why does it cause real diplomatic friction? Because in geopolitics, symbolism is never just symbolism. It's testing the room. It's measuring how far a narrative can travel before it hits a wall. And Denmark decided to be that wall publicly. Now let's add the core claim behind the US rhetoric, as Trump has framed it. Greenland is strategically vital and rich in minerals, especially resources considered critical for high-tech and defense supply chains. And Greenland's position in the Arctic places it at the intersection of security, surveillance, shipping routes, and great power competition. So on one side, you have a strategic argument. On the other side, you have a sovereignty argument. But here's where it gets more serious. Trump has reportedly refused to rule out using force to secure control of Greenland. Even if that's political posturing, it's exactly the kind of language that makes allies stop treating something as a headline and start treating it as a security question. Mini rehook. Why would Denmark take it so personally, so quickly? Because Denmark is not only a close US partner, Denmark is also a NATO member. Frederiksen emphasized that Denmark, and thus Greenland, is covered by NATO's security guarantee. And she highlighted something crucial that gets ignored in viral clips. Denmark already has a defense agreement with the United States that provides US access to Greenland, and Denmark has increased investment in Arctic security, meaning the cooperation already exists. So the takeover framing isn't about access, it's about ownership, and that's a completely different category. Greenland is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, with extensive autonomy since 1979, while defense and foreign policy remain under Danish authority. It has around 57,000 people, small in population, enormous in geopolitical weight. And here's the detail most people miss. Many Greenlanders favor eventual independence from Denmark, but polling and public debate show overwhelming opposition to becoming part of the United States. This is not Denmark versus the US alone. It's Denmark, Greenland, and the US. Three different interests, three different identities, one extremely sensitive geography. So, Why does the takeover idea keep coming back? Because Greenland sits at the crossroads of modern power, security infrastructure, Arctic strategy, and critical resources. And when a region becomes that valuable, you get something like a slow-motion tug-of-war made of statements, appointments, media cycles, and diplomatic pressure rather than a single dramatic event. Which brings us to the next major accelerant, the U.S. appointment of a special envoy to Greenland. According to publicly reported information, the appointment intensified anger in Denmark, especially because the role was framed in a way that suggested support for the idea of Greenland joining the U.S. Whether that was meant as a serious plan or as political theater, Denmark read it as a message. This is not going away. Now pause here because we need to separate what's confirmed from what's interpreted. Confirmed. Denmark's Prime Minister directly rejected the idea of U.S. takeover and urged an end to threats. Denmark emphasized NATO coverage and existing U.S.-Denmark defense cooperation regarding Greenland. Pro-U.S. acquisition messaging has been publicly amplified by figures close to Trump, including symbolic social media content. Greenland's political leadership has pushed back, underscoring autonomy and rejecting the for sale narrative. Interpretation. Some see this as negotiation tactics, push hard, then settle for expanded strategic presence and resource partnerships. Others see it as domestic political messaging, a high-visibility issue that rallies certain voter segments. And some analysts see it as a broader Arctic posture shift, where the language is the point, not the immediate outcome. But what made Denmark's tone even sharper this time? Around the same period, international coverage highlighted a major U.S. military operation in Venezuela, including reports that Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, was captured and transferred to the United States. Those reports and the broader tension they created appear to have heightened Danish concern about how far U.S. actions could go when framed as security necessities. Important note: Greenland and Venezuela are not the same situation legally, politically, or historically. But in diplomatic risk assessment, countries don't only evaluate what's identical. They evaluate what a sequence of actions might signal. So when Denmark hears, "We need Greenland," plus "We won't rule out force," and sees a global environment where unexpected moves are being discussed openly, Denmark responds fast, because silence in geopolitics can be interpreted as permission. So what's the real battleground? Military, minerals, or messaging? It's messaging first, and that's what makes it dangerous. Because when leaders use ownership language about another people's land, it reshapes expectations. It normalizes the idea that sovereignty can be debated like a purchase. Denmark's Prime Minister addressed that head-on with the line that cuts through everything. The U.S. has no right to annex any of the 3 nations in the Danish kingdom. That's not just a political retort, that's a boundary. And Greenland's position is equally clear in its own way. The island belongs to Greenlanders, and decisions about its future must come from them, not from slogans, not from outside pressure, and not from viral maps. Now, let's talk about what happens next, realistically, without sensationalism. There are 2 plausible paths forward. 1. De-escalation through expanded cooperation. The U.S. and Denmark could increase Arctic security coordination, more investment, more joint planning, more presence without changing sovereignty. This is the quiet diplomacy path. 2. Economic influence instead of political ownership. Rather than takeover talk, the focus could shift to long-term partnerships around infrastructure and critical minerals. Influence is often built through contracts, not flags. Which path is most likely? That depends on one thing that doesn't trend on social media: Greenland's domestic politics. Because Greenland's long-term direction, more autonomy, eventual independence, or deeper ties within the Danish realm will shape how any outside offer is received. And if Greenlanders overwhelmingly reject becoming a US territory, then aggressive rhetoric doesn't win hearts. It hardens resistance. So the next logical question isn't, will Greenland be taken? It's this: how does Greenland's push for greater self-determination evolve when global powers are treating the Arctic like the next big strategic frontier? That's what we'll break down in the next video. Greenland's legal and political pathway to greater autonomy, what independence actually means in practice, and why the Arctic is becoming one of the most quietly consequential regions on Earth. If you want this channel to keep separating confirmed facts from political signaling, leave a comment with what you want next: the NATO angle, the legal constraints, the Arctic defense map, or the critical minerals question.